police officer shot dead at Croydon Custody Centre in South London. Two people severely injured in a knife attack in Paris. We begin today in England, where a police officer has been shot dead at Croydon Custody Centre in South London. The male sergeant was shot in the chest when a man who was being detained produced a weapon during a search. The suspect then apparently shot himself. The officer was treated at the scene overnight but died in the hospital. A 23-year-old man is in critical condition after being treated for gunshot wounds. The victim is believed to have been a few weeks away from retirement.
The Met is a family. Policing is a family in London and across the United Kingdom. And today, we police are all mourning a great loss. I would like to thank our officers and the staff, together with colleagues from the London Ambulance Service, the London Air Ambulance, and all our medical and hospital colleagues who I know did everything they could to save his life. A murder investigation is underway and officers are working at several crime scenes to secure evidence and to establish the facts of what happened. We are working closely with the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Early indications are that the suspect shot himself. This has not yet, of course, been established as a fact. The man, I can tell you, remains in a critical condition in hospital.
In France, two people have been seriously hurt in a knife attack in Paris near the former offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Reports say two suspects have been arrested in connection with the attack. The attack comes as a high-profile trial of 14 people alleged to have been involved in the 2015 attack on Charlie Hebdo is underway in Paris. Well, let's get more on this story from the VOA correspondent in Paris, Lisa Bryant. Lisa, thanks for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure.
So, what else could you tell us about the knife attack near the former offices of Charlie Hebdo?
So what we know at the moment is there are two suspects that were detained fairly quickly and are under questioning. They seem to both be of foreign origin. That's according to the latest news reports. And as you noted, so there were a lot of very chilling sort of parallels with the actual attack that took place in 2015 and the trial that you just mentioned. So these attacks took place, as you said, in front of the old headquarters of Charlie Hebdo. They targeted two journalists from a production company that worked alongside in the same building as Charlie Hebdo. The timing was actually pretty much the same time as when the Charlie Hebdo strikes in 2015 occurred. That was, in this case, it was late morning. So the Paris prosecutor, Jaime Heitz, drew a lot of parallels with this between these two attacks, and he said that's one of the reasons why they've opened a investigation into possible terrorism motive. As you noted, this is happening during the trial, so French are like reliving all the trauma of 2015, where we also had another attack in Paris in November 2015. So this is a very it's a very hard time for many Parisians.
Well, speaking of the trauma of 2015, do you know if this attack is related to the trial of those alleged to have been involved in that 2015 attack on the offices?
There are parallels to, the trial is taking place at the same time. There's no conclusive evidence, but the prosecutor believes that there may have been a motive to target at the same time. Charlie Hebdo has been getting death threats recently. In fact, French journalists have, come in support because what they decided to do is republish some very controversial cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad in the name of free speech, not necessarily in the name of mocking the prophet, but in the name of defending free speech. And they've been under new attack. And those very same cartoons were one of the reasons why the satirical newspaper was targeted in 2015.
Well, yes, as you mentioned, Al-Qaeda did recently threaten Charlie Hebdo for reprinting those controversial cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. So are there fears of a terror attack like that of in 2015 that may be launched on Paris?
It's hard to say. The Europol, which is a European policing force, comes out with, an annual report. And what they found is across France and also across Europe, the numbers of attacks and the size of the attacks are much smaller now. Al-Qaeda is an Islamic State or in sub-Saharan Africa, but Islamic State in particular is no longer, this big organization that was trying to have a caliphate in the Middle East. So a lot of people think if there's going to be, these are experts, going to be future strikes are often likely to be lone wolf terror attacks, one or two small people. Whether that can equal the kind of attacks that we saw with Charlie Hebdo, with the Bataclan in November 2015, where scores of people were killed, that seems, perhaps more difficult. But, it's always a possibility, I think. One last quick thing to add is that it's coming right ahead of some draft legislation the government is supposed to be introducing within weeks, and President Macron is supposed to be talking about next week. It plans to fight against what they call separatism, which includes radical Islam, anything that the government considers a threat to French values, the French way of life, free speech, and all of that.
Well, yes, it definitely is important to consider that. I'm trying to figure out why this attack has happened. But what about the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo? What are they saying about this latest attack?
They have sent, they say that they're totally sympathetic and they're totally backing these reporters and these journalists that were targeted. And of course, the survivors of Charlie Hebdo are reliving a very traumatic moment now, and some of them have gone and testified at this trial. So they say they have full solidarity with the two people who were injured in this attack today.